Welcome everyone. This is Paul Whittle here with American Allstar Realty. And today we're going to be sharing another HUD secret where best practices for completing the HUD sales contract for the state of Arizona. So thanks for tuning in today, and we'll get right to it. Just as a preliminary piece of information, it's important to realize that there is a pretty significant difference between the standard Arizona Association of Realtors contract and the HUD contract. The HUD contract is used nationwide versus our state contract is specific to Arizona and supported by the Arizona Association of Realtors. So that there are two different contract packages, and it's important to realize that when you're getting ready to sell and a HUD-owned property, that you explain the difference to the buyer. So we're just going to go through that over the next couple of minutes and hopefully answer any questions that you might have about that process and increase and improve your knowledge on the HUD sales contract, how to complete it. So we're going to go ahead and do a screen share. We have a nice presentation put together to share with you here. So bear with me here just 1 second, and we'll go through this presentation. All right, so the HUD sales contract can be accessed from HUDhomestore.com or from blbresources.com in the Arizona Forms section. Again, we do not submit the state contract, just the HUD contract. In the event that you do have an accepted bid on a HUD property, you'll also receive a complete HUD sales contract package emailed to you from BLB Resources upon notification of bid acceptance. So there's a couple of different places where you can get that HUD sales contract. I always recommend that you go in advance and just kind of prepare yourself and make sure that you have a little bit of practice completing the forms. It'll make it a little bit easier when you're in front of the buyer getting ready to fill that out. When the data is entered on the cover sheet of the sales contract package, it automatically fills in all of the blanks throughout the package. It's a form-based system. So if you can complete this cover page correctly, you're going to save yourself a ton of time throughout the contract because all of the information is going to be transferring through. It's also important to realize that there is a difference between a broker and a selling agent on the HUD sales contract. The selling agent is the person that's actually representing the buyer to purchase the property. The broker is going to be the designated broker of record who's tied to the brokerage EIN number and NAID number. So it's just important to know that difference because there's some initials and signatures that are required from each one of the parties throughout the contract package, and we'll cover those as well. All right, when completing this, there is a new form that was released within the last year. It is a conflict of interest certification, just to make sure that there is not any relationship with HUD employees or any type of conflicts that might be present. All right, when completing the sales contract, the FHA case number is always going to be in the upper right-hand box. This can be found on HUDhomestore.com when you're placing the offer. It's also available on the MLS. All of the listing agents in the Phoenix metro area are going to input the HUD case number right in the MLS special remarks. But again, it's also available on BLB Resources, HUD Home Store, and the MLS. So there's plenty of places to get that. On line 1, you're going to enter the purchaser's name and the complete property address. Always remember to include the county. So whether it's in Maricopa County, Pinal County, Yavapai County, it's important that the name of the county immediately follows the zip code in the address. On number 2, you're going to enter the names and the style in which the property is going to be purchased. So in this example, you can see John Doe, a single man. It might be John and Jane Doe, community property. It could be tenants in common. And we always recommend that the buyer, of course, seek legal counsel to decide the method in which they're going to be taking title. On line 3, this is pretty important. This is where we're going to enter the agreed purchase price. Now, again, all of the bidding takes place through HUDhomestore.com. So you're going to know what your winning bid is based on the bid that you submitted on behalf of the buyer directly onto HUD Home Store. It's important that you print out that confirmation so you have all of the details when you're getting ready to fill out the contract package. The earnest money is standard on all HUD contracts. They're not negotiable. If the purchase price is $50,000 or less, the earnest money is going to be $500. If it's $50,001 or more, the earnest money is $1,000. Vacant lots, it's 50% of the list price, and GNND properties, which is good neighbor next door, is 1% of the list price, which is always going to be a range between 500 and 2,000. Again, those are not negotiable. For the title company, you're going to see that there's some pre-filled language in there that says listing agent until ratification and then. After the words and then, that's where you're going to enter the buyer's choice of title company. The buyer has the option to choose the title company they wish to use with the purchase of the HUD property, and that's where we're going to enter that information. Now, for financing, there are a couple of different options here. For this one, for this example, you're seeing that they're selecting FHA 203B, which is just your standard FHA financing where there's not any escrow repair, there's not any type of repair work or renovation loan like the 203K or 203B repair escrow. The down payment amount, mortgage amount, months, repair escrow should always be left blank for this type of financing. For the 203B, you can see that we have 203B repair escrow selected. You are going to check the box that said there is a repair escrow amount, but that is to be determined. And the reason that that's determined, again, is because it's going to be the buyer's lender that determines what that amount is. After the buyer completes or buyer's lender completes the FHA appraisal, we're going to get a list of items that the property is subject to repairs, and we'll be able to create an amendment at that point to determine what that repair escrow amount is going to be. That form, request to change financing type, is found on the BLB Resources website. Now, if they're looking for 203K, again, this one is simple. There's not a repair escrow. It's just the 203K box checked. Now, if the buyer is using any other type of financing besides FHA, you're going to check that last box that says the buyer is paying cash or applying for conventional or other financing not involving FHA. All right, now when we're looking at the closing cost assistance and commissions, this is pretty standard, straightforward. The buyer can request up to 3% of closing cost assistance that HUD can contribute towards their closing costs at close of escrow. The commissions, there's going to be separate line items 6A and 6B. Now 6A is going to be the selling agent commission. So if you're representing the buyer, your commission would be entered into 6A. Now you can adjust that on your offer when you're submitting the offer on HUDhomestore.com. However, the listing brokerage commission cannot be adjusted. It's always going to be what is indicated on HUDhomestore.com, which as of right now in Arizona, the commission is going to be 3%. So again, there is the ability to negotiate the selling agent commission, which is the agent representing the buyer, if you're trying to adjust the net that HUD is going to receive or increase the net. Again, that's a conversation with your buyer. Commissions are always negotiable. And we've gone through that. All right, so going through the net amount due seller, that box is normally automatically calculated based on the sales price minus the closing cost assistance minus the commission. On line number 8, you're going to check the appropriate box for the occupancy, whether it's an owner, occupant, investor, nonprofit, other government agency. Just make sure that the correct box is shown. On number 9, the sale of the closing shall not be later than, and that's going to be arranged depending on the financing type. It's always 30 days for investor purchases, regardless of what type of financing they're using. It's going to be 30 days for cash or hard money purchases, regardless of the purchasing type. 45 days for owner occupants using the regular 203B, and 60 days for owner occupants using the 203K. Now, in the on-line item 9, the contract used to require, the HUD contract used to require that we would select HUD designated closing agent. That's no longer the case. Now we're always going to enter, again, the buyer's choice of title company. The buyer has the option in the state of Arizona to select their own title company, and we're going to indicate that on item number 9. On 10, it's important to note that HUD no longer awards backup bids, and they can review bids solely at the seller discretion, but they don't automatically hold or award backup bids. So it's on a case-by-case basis. Now, in the event the property was built prior to 1978, make sure to check the box that the lead-based paint is attached. The box for other addendum is attached must always be checked, because there are plenty of other addendums that are going to be incorporated in, which we're going to go through here throughout this presentation. All right, on line 12, this is very important that the purchaser initials this item. This is probably the most commonly missed initial in my review of HUD contracts. It's always a good idea to have a contract checklist, which is provided on blbresources.com, that walks you through all of the different steps, depending on the buyer type, that you would need to complete in order to make sure that you have a complete contract package. It is also suggested or advised that you have the listing broker review the package prior to sending off to BLB Resources. They see contract packages all the time and would be able to do a proofread for you. But again, following the checklist is probably the best piece of advice that I can give you. In doing so, you'll make sure that you have it all complete and accurate. All right, on 13, this is where the buyer signs the purchase contract. Their address is entered, and then below that, it's their social security number, which must match the social security number that was used when placing the bid on HUD Home Store, and their phone number. This is also where they're going to date the contract. Make sure that they do not sign as the seller. The broker signature. This is actually the broker who is registered as the NAID broker for HUD. So the one who has the NAID number tied to their name, typically the designated broker of the company. It must be an actual signature, not an electronic signature. HUD is working towards getting electronic signatures, but they're not there yet. So in this case, and for all HUD contracts, we're going to enter the brokerage name, their EIN number, their name and signature, their NAID number, and their phone number. And then below that, it's going to be the name, phone number, and email address of the selling agent. So the agent that's actually representing the buyer or working with the buyer. Conditions of sale. This must be signed by the purchaser. It's very important that the purchaser reviews this document prior to signing it. As with any contracts, the agent and the buyer should always review the paperwork prior to signing. All right. Electronic filing of the contract addendum. This must be initialed. Either they are a licensed real estate broker or they're not a licensed real estate broker. And the appropriate initial needs to be checked, or the appropriate box needs to be checked. They also have to indicate if they're affiliated or related to any local listing brokers. And then a signature with the broker's signature at the bottom. Again, both the purchaser and selling agent and broker must sign this document. Conflict of interest, same thing. We want to make sure that there aren't any conflicts of interest, that there aren't any employees, immediate family members, affiliated entities of anyone working with HUD. If there is a relationship, it must be disclosed, and all parties need to sign at the bottom. Again, this one requires the purchaser's, selling agent, and selling broker signature. All right, we're moving on to the radon gas and mold release. This is the standard disclosure about, possible occurrences or presence of radon gas and mold, and the buyer obviously has an opportunity to investigate those things, which is always recommended by the seller, and this has to be signed by the purchaser. Owner occupant certification. If the buyer is purchasing as an owner occupant, it's very important that they understand the ramifications and the guidelines with which they must comply to as an owner occupant. And what that means is that they have not purchased a HUD-owned property in the past 24 months as an owner occupant, and then they're going to occupy the property for at least the next 12 months. Both the purchaser and the broker need to sign this document. The HUD forfeiture and extension policy. It's very important that the buyer and the selling agent initial and sign this document and understand the terms. The earnest money can be forfeited in the event that the buyer does not close in accordance with the contract. There are some additional initials on the same document. and then signatures at the bottom of page 3. The forfeiture and extension policy is a 3-page document. There's 3 initials for the purchaser, 3 initials for the selling agent, and then a signature for both at the bottom. Getting a home inspection. This is important. It's always recommended that the buyer get a home inspection, perform that prior to close of escrow. And it's also important that you see that there's an initial required by the buyer and a signature. The initial is they're either going to choose to have a home inspection or choose not to have a home inspection. They're going to initial one of those boxes and then they're going to sign at the bottom. Now, the contract package, in order to be complete prior to being sent to BLB Resources, does need a copy of the earnest money check. Now, the original earnest money is delivered to the listing broker's office. So a copy of the earnest money check is sent in with the contract package to BLB Resources. There needs to be a pre-qualification letter or proof of funds. It must be within 30 days. You need a copy of the agency disclosure form. That's the standard AAR, or Arizona Association of Realtors agency disclosure. You're going to need the buyer select closing agent addendum and the HUD closing instructions and certification and additional escrow instructions. The earnest money check must be made payable to title company or buyer's name. Both must be there. So as you can see in this example, ABC Escrow Company or John Doe, that entire thing needs to be there. The buyer's choice of escrow or their name. At the bottom in the memo line, you're going to put the case number and the street address. Again, we talked about this. The original earnest money check must be delivered to the local listing broker within 2 business days of bid acceptance. Proof of funds and pre-qualification letters must be in the buyer's name, and it must be clearly identified, within the last 30 days with a balance for, proof of funds with a balance to cover the purchase price. If it's a pre-qualification letter, it must be on the lender's letterhead with the loan officer's email address. And here's just a sample agency disclosure. This is for California Association of Realtors. Obviously in Arizona, it would be the Arizona Association of Realtors standard form. Now, this is the Arizona Buyer Select Closing Agent Addendum. With this document, you're going to fill in the FHA case number, purchaser's name, and selling agent information. Fill in the escrow company and attach a copy of their E&O insurance and licenses if no previous HUD transactions have been closed with this escrow company. Purchaser and selling agent must sign and date this form at the bottom. For the closing instructions and certification, only the FHA case number, property address, and buyer's name should be filled in on the first page. The remaining fields will be left blank at the time of the contract, and the escrow company will be required to fill in these fields prior to close of escrow based on the terms of the deal. The escrow officer must sign and complete page 4. So there's a couple of steps in getting a contract package signed. The purchaser needs to sign it. The selling agent needs to sign it. The designated broker or the broker who's assigned to the NAID number and the escrow officer all have a part in getting this contract package complete. So it does take a little bit of coordination, and it's important to let those parties know in advance. For the additional escrow instructions, the FHA case number must be entered on the first page. If there's closing costs requested on line 5, those need to be entered on page 2. If it's an FHA insured financing with repair escrow, the repair amount must be input at the top of the page. In the event you don't have this yet, obviously you're going to leave that blank and it'll be completed later based on the buyer's lender's appraisal. Additional escrow instructions, this requires the purchaser's initials and the escrow officer's initials, and then both of their signatures at the bottom as well as the selling agent. The contract package may also include or require the lead-based paint addendum if the property was built prior to 1978. Additional lead-based paint information receipt addendum, again, if built prior to 1978. The flood zone disclosure and addendum, if the property is located in a FEMA flood zone, which would be identified on the MLS and blbresources.com and HUDhomestore.com. Proof of identity, and the sales package verification checklist. Now, the lead-based paint disclosure can be obtained on blbresources.com or HUDhomestore.com. Again, it is required in the event the property is built prior to 1978. There also needs to be provided in the event the property is built prior to 1978, the lead-based paint information receipt addendum. That has to be submitted with the contract package. and it can be obtained on blbresources.com, the forms section. It might be required if there's new information as well, or an updated form might be required in the event that new information is presented that indicates the property might be affected by lead-based paint, and that would be handled on a case-by-case basis. If it's submitted separate from the contract package, it would be sent, or it can be faxed or emailed to either one of these sources. So the fax number and email address both are listed on this page for your reference. The lead-based paint information receipt addendum. Again, all properties built prior to 1978 have to include this addendum. It will indicate if the seller has records or does not have records related to lead-based paint being present at the property. It's also going to require initials, that a copy of the EPA-approved pamphlet, Protect Your Family from Lead in Your Home, is received. Again, this is a document that is required on all contracts. It's required that the purchaser, which is the buyer, and the selling broker, not the agent, must sign and date this form. The flood zone disclosure and addendum, again, this is only required if the property is located in a FEMA flood zone, and it does require the purchasers and selling agents initial, or not initials, but signatures at the bottom. It's really important that the buyer get flood insurance quotes early on in the process for HUD-owned properties that are indicated to be in a FEMA flood zone. Proof of identity. It's normally suggested that a legible copy of the driver's license is submitted with the contract package. That way there's no ambiguity on who's signing the contract. Sales package verification checklist. I talked about this very early on in the presentation. I always recommend that every agent who's completing a sales contract go through the verification checklist. It makes your job a little bit easier, making sure that you have all the requirements, and that way you're submitting a complete, clean contract package to BLB, and there's no delays in getting the signed contract back. In the event that the buyer is going to have an inspection done at the property, the buyer or selling agent would want to submit a utilities request form, which would be sent to the field service manager. A copy of that form can be obtained from the BLB Resources website. It's not sent to BLB. They're just providing it as a courtesy, but all of the contact information for the field service manager is on that form. All right, now what do you do once you have all of these documents put together? You're going to send them, so they're received within 2 business days of bid acceptance, to BLB Resources. And their address is listed here on this page. It's also on the checklist. It's also on the instructions from the listing agent and the instructions from BLB Resources. So that information should be provided a couple of times throughout this process. You should really know where to send that. Again, original earnest money is always delivered to the listing broker's office. The listing broker will then deliver that to the title company, the buyer's choice of title company, once we have a signed contract. If you ever need more assistance, you can always call BLB or the local listing broker, and they will walk you through that process. All right, I hope you've enjoyed our presentation here and had an opportunity to learn some new information about what it takes to complete the HUD sales contract. Again, my name is Paul Whittle with American Allstar Realty. I'm always here to help if you do have any specific questions about a HUD contract you're working on with me, and look forward to working with you in the near future. Thanks for tuning in today, and make it a great day.